Good morning everyone. I thought I'd do this video because we've had a lot of new members join WTU and to be frank they don't quite know what we're all about. So I thought I'd do a live video on our public page which I'll then share in our closed page to hopefully explain to newcomers what we're all about. So I'll introduce myself. My name's Phil Monk and I'm the founder of We the Undersigned Have a Human Sovereign Right to Cannabis. I founded We the Undersigned in March 2018, mainly because I was so frustrated and angry with the British government for its deception around cannabis, mainly the benefits of cannabis. So I set out to try and find a human rights solicitor to take my case in the first instance against the government to see if I could find a case for my human right to have cannabis. It also occurred to me, literally in the same moment, that there's millions of people like me, and it's not just me. So I then invited other people to undersign to the letter that I was intending to send to every human rights solicitor in the country. That was back in March 2018, and the response was outstanding. I had floods of yes please undersign me to your letters. And I had to make a group. I'd never made a group before on Facebook. I barely even used Facebook before becoming a campaigner. So I had to set up a group, and I didn't really know what to call it, but I was asking people to undersign to my letter, and I believed I had a human right to cannabis. So hence the name We the Undersigned Have a Human Sovereign Right to Cannabis, because I've spent the last 12 months or more writing to every solicitor, every MP, every Justice Minister, the Queen, everyone you can think of. I've been writing to them on behalf of We the Undersigned to express that we have a human right for cannabis. I can't say it's got us very far in some ways because we're still here and still being prosecuted, but I have actually, after about 13-14 months of looking, I have now got a solicitor willing to take the case for WTU. Now when I say willing to take the case, in the first instance they have to do a review of the case to see if they think it has merit and has much chance of succeeding in court. So after a heck of a long year of hard work, that's where we're at now, and tomorrow, 4:20 at 4:20, the WTU Legal Fund will be launched, so as a community we can all help each other fight the government for our human right to cannabis. Now some people might say, well, why do you think you've got a human right to cannabis? And I'll explain really, because I've been campaigning since 2014 when my own health spiralled and I had to use cannabis. Pharmaceutical drugs nearly killed me 4 times, with a brain hemorrhage scare, a mini stroke scare and 2 cancer scares, all from side effects. And it was then that I realised that the recreational drug that I'd been using since I was 16 actually was more beneficial for me than any of the prescribed pharmaceutical drugs that they were giving to me. And on that basis I made the autonomous health decision to no longer use pharmaceutical drugs and to start using natural herbal cannabis instead. It also, because I'd had these severe reactions to these pharmaceutical drugs, and I'd used cannabis all my life, like I've said, since I was 16. I thought I was just a pothead and I never thought anything more about it, it's just cannabis. I actually started researching the effects of cannabis upon human health, mainly because I've had to have both of my arms shortened. You can just about see a scar there. I used to do a lot of mountain biking as a kid, and it made my bones grow too long, my ulnar bone, and that was destroying my joints in my wrist. So the surgeon, after 10 years, decided to shorten this bone and reduce it by 4 millimeters and take out a disc of bone, plate it back together and shorten it. And I've had that done on both sides. And when they decided to do that surgery, I knew tobacco is poisonous. I know alcohol is poison. And I started to think, well, what does cannabis do to my bones, What's going to happen? Do I need to stop cannabis for my operations? I knew I had to stop tobacco. So I started Googling. Now I should mention that prior to falling ill, I was a teacher. I used to teach 4 subjects. I used to teach literacy, numeracy, Spanish and English to speakers of other languages. So I'm actually academically trained to PGCE standard, which also incorporated half of a master's. So in terms of academic performance, well, I got nearly straight A's in every module. So I was actually an able academic. So I decided to apply my academic skills learnt at uni while becoming a teacher to looking into the effects of cannabis. I also wrote to the government in 2014, every minister, health minister, justice minister, prime minister, deputy prime minister, and to tell them all that basically I'd started growing my own cannabis because it's the only safe way to do it. Because if you go to the underground market, you don't know what you're getting, you don't know what it's cut with or what it's prepared with, whether it's been cleaned, flushed. You haven't got a clue. And also you don't know if it's supporting the underground market, the criminal networks. It might have people trafficking, it could have grow slaves. So from a moral and ethical point of view, purchasing your cannabis from the underground market that's unregulated isn't necessarily the most moral and ethical thing to do. And it definitely isn't the safest. There's only one safe way to get your own cannabis, and that's to take care of yourself and do the job yourself. And even when you look at some of these industrial pharmaceutical grows, they're full of spider mites and all sorts, so they don't even care for their flowers, they don't love their plants. You get any hobby grower that cares for themselves, and they love their plants. If anything bad happens to their plants, they feel bad about it, because their health depends upon these plants, and I don't see why that should be a crime. So, once I started researching the benefits of cannabis, and I found out that cannabis actually regulates bone growth, density and development. So I needed cannabis actually to keep my bones growing and keeping them strong for my healing. So actually cannabis became essential to the repair of my bones. So I thought, hold on, this is interesting, because I've been told cannabis is bad for me by the government for as long as I can remember. The government have said cannabis is bad. So I started digging. I wrote to the government, like I say, and they wrote back and threatened me with 14 years in prison, which is a bit of a hefty sentence for someone who's just looking after themselves. So they were being a bit menacing and a bit threatening and trying to bully me into stop looking after my own health as I determined most appropriate for me. They also put a little sentence in their letter telling me how harmful and dangerous cannabis was, and I had a bit of a panic, thinking, oh God, maybe they're right. So academic mind kicked in. I took their phrase and I searched it, and I found it in its context, its research context. And the research was talking about how cannabis causes mental illness and schizophrenia and psychosis. So I actually looked at the research in context, and the government have misrepresented the findings completely for decades. And the findings actually state that it's the early onset of cannabis in adolescence that can cause psychosis or induce psychosis. And they also said people with a family history of psychosis. So the government have applied this very narrow finding and extrapolated it across every adult human being in the country, which isn't fair, isn't just, and isn't tolerant. And it also isn't true, because you need to stop 4,000 people using cannabis to prevent one person from having a potential psychotic breakdown. So that means you have to destroy 3,999 lives through criminalisation just to protect a potential one person from having a psychotic episode. And then I started digging more, and I found out that cannabis regulates the endocannabinoid system. Now, the endocannabinoid system is a system that's in our bodies, and it turns out it regulates everything. Yeah, it creates homeostasis. I don't know if you can remember your GCSE biology classes, but we talked about homeostasis back in there. And homeostasis is basically the perfect balance of all of your body's systems. So when you are in homeostasis, your body is balanced perfectly and running as it should do. Now, when something is a regulator and a modulator and a controller and all these other terms that they use, it occurred to me after many years of reading and many different papers that cannabis regulates growth, cannabis regulates mood, cannabis regulates sleep, cannabis regulates appetite, and cannabis regulating all these things through our endocannabinoid system. It then occurred to me that cannabis isn't a drug. I mean, yeah, you can get high from it, don't get me wrong, but ultimately cannabis is a food. It is actually an essential nutrient, in my opinion. I would say almost learned opinion from what I've read. Cannabis is an essential nutrient to maintain homeostasis. If you take out the regulator of systems, these systems become unregulated and will break down. So if you remove the essential regulator of any systems, those systems will become malfunctioning systems, and then you'll have an endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome, as it's starting to be called. So the fact that we're denied cannabis, to me, is against our human rights, because human right to health exists. We have a human right to the freedom of consciousness, which means no government in the world can tell you what state of minds you experience or what thought processes you have. Yeah, as long as you're not harming other people. You've got the freedom of expression. You're allowed to express your identity. Yeah, walk down the street in this, you might get arrested and searched for having cannabis on your person. Victimisation, in my opinion. So, basically, I've spent the last 4 or 5 years researching so many medical papers, so many historical papers, and cannabis has been used by humans as a traditional herbal health remedy for tens of thousands of years. It's been used as a recreational drug that is far safer than alcohol, 114 times safer than alcohol, if you want the fact. So we're actually denied the right to choose between a very dangerous, poisonous recreational drug that is known to cause psychosis and cancer and aggression and depression, and another recreational drug that is known to create homeostasis and to balance all of your body systems. Yes, it can get you high, and to be honest, it's much nicer being high than it is being pissed, and people should have that freedom of choice. Now, as I've said, I was nearly killed by pharmaceutical drugs, so I started campaigning because I thought everybody should be able to have the choice to use cannabis if they wish. I used to believe in medicinal cannabis. Now, I know there's no such thing. There's cannabis, yeah? Cannabis is cannabis. Doesn't matter. It's just cannabis. They call hemp. Hemp is cannabis. It's some arbitrary categorisation that if it has 0.2 THC or less, it qualifies as hemp and not cannabis. But it is still a cannabis plant. So, I started campaigning, and I was just supported other groups, really. But in 2018, I got very angry because we had little Alfie Dingley in the news, we had Murray Gray in the news, and we had Billy Caldwell in the news. And it was heartbreaking, these children with epilepsy, that all they need is some cannabis oil that anyone can make for themselves, truth be told. It is not a complex task. Virtually anyone can grow their own cannabis and make their own cannabis oil. You do not need some intermediary, overpriced pharmaceutical industry patenting and profiting off your misery. Okay, herbal independence is what you seek, and you should try for it. Because these children, even though the law changed, they still haven't got their cannabis oil. You've still got specialists saying, "Oh, we haven't got the evidence, we can't prescribe for that, it might harm them," and then filling them full of nasty pharmaceutical drugs that are harming them. So the logic doesn't stand up, and it actually removes all freedom of choice. People have no choice under the current model. You are dictated to by either your health professional or your government as to what you can and can't do with your body. And WTU objects to that. WTU believes in the freedom of consciousness, like I've said. Now, cannabis can be used as a herbal health remedy, as a food supplement, as a safer recreational drug. I love it for enhancing my creativity and my spirituality. And actually, I wouldn't have ever connected with the higher force that people call God had it not been for cannabis. I wouldn't be alive now had it not been for cannabis, because I wouldn't have got past 16 because I was mentally, physically and sexually abused as a child by people that should have protected me. And I was suicidally depressed for years, and cannabis stopped me committing suicide because it calmed my thoughts and allowed me to carry on living. So I would not be alive now without cannabis, and I'm not the only one. So I set up WTU to try and get a solicitor, because when I started researching, I found the report that the government received in 1998. It was from Philip Robson, and he found that cannabis is remarkably therapeutic. It's called Philip Robson, 2001, The Therapeutic Aspects of Cannabis, and it was published in the British Journal of Psychiatry, if I recall properly. And Philip Robson found that cannabis is remarkably therapeutic, okay? Remarkably therapeutic. It's been used throughout history as a safe herbal health remedy. So the government, that was finding one. Second one was that time was needed to develop marketable and patentable cannabis-based products. And the third finding was that government should cease the criminalisation of peaceful people who are seeking to assuage their symptoms with natural herbal cannabis. The House of Lords supported the findings and also said that the cannabis should be rescheduled from Schedule 1 down to Schedule 2 and be made available on prescription, and no one should be prosecuted. The government at the time, and every other government since, refused that report and the recommendations. They hid the fact that cannabis is highly therapeutic. They hid the recommendation that people should no longer be prosecuted for choosing cannabis. And they then granted time to the author to become the medical director of a well-known pharmaceutical company globally that is now called GW Pharmaceuticals. And they're worth hundreds of billions on the stock exchange, so I'm led to believe. So it turns out, ironically enough, that not only did the government know back in 1998 that cannabis is safe, therapeutic, and people shouldn't go to prison, they actually, many of them, became invested in this new fledgling cannabis company. So we've got our own Prime Minister and our own Drugs Minister. Their husbands are heavily involved in those industries. So through their partners' bonuses, they are profiting from cannabis prohibition. They've changed the law so that cannabis can be made available on prescription in very strict circumstances. That makes no difference to them because they're still selling their Sativex and Epidiolex from GW all around the world for billions. So even though British people aren't getting it, it's still being shipped and sold around the world for hundreds of billions of pounds, and every investor in that business will be making a tidy little profit. And that is why they don't want you to grow your own. They don't want you to have herbal independence so you can just grow your own seeds and make your own remedies and not have to turn to these overpriced pharmaceutical goods. It's all for them to make profit, more profit, and also it protects their monopoly. By putting people like me in prison, what am I doing? I'm not harming a single soul in this planet. I really am not harming a soul. No harm is done. I'm just seeking herbal independence to manage my health, so I don't need to use pharmaceutical drugs or the poisonous recreational drug alcohol. I've replaced both of those with cannabis. Why should I go to prison for that health choice? That's what the government would do to me. And that is to protect their monopoly, to protect their business interests. The only threat I am in my actions, there's no threat to morality, there's no threat to community or anyone. My threat is to their stakeholders and their investments. So I got really angry about that, that these people that deny the truth, deny us access, are profiting from it massively. And that is just, how's that fair and right in a democratic and tolerant society? So I became a bit angry and decided to contact human rights solicitors. I've literally spent since last March, you wouldn't believe how many letters I've written, how many calls I've taken. I've been in conferences, protests, meetings with police chiefs. I've been doing everything I can to try and change things for people so that no one has to live with the fear that I have to live in and my family have to live in. The doorbell knocks, we all get scared because you never know. Is that a boot coming through the door? Is that our house about to be violently ransacked? I don't know. We won't ever know until we get this law changed. We'll always live in fear. So we're trying to get out of this fear. I'm not here to break the law, I'm here to change the law because the law is unjust. The law is inhumane. And actually, if I abide by this rule and this law, it's damaging to my health. Now, I cannot abide by any law that is damaging to my health. I can't. So I think Thomas Jefferson said, if a law is immoral and unjust, then you have a moral duty to break it. And that's what everyone does. Now, if you use cannabis, I believe it should be used for any reason. It doesn't matter what it is. If you use cannabis or believe people should have the freedom to use cannabis without proper prosecution, then please come and join We the Undersigned have a human sovereign right to cannabis. You don't have to use cannabis to support freedom. And that's what WTU is about, actually, freedom. So I've finally got a solicitor, and they are willing to take our case and present it before some barristers, some top human rights barristers. So now I've got to build an evidence bundle, and obviously now as a community we need to raise some money because legal fees aren't cheap. So we're looking at between £6,000 and £10,000 to get this case seen before barristers. Assuming the barristers find an angle, which I believe they will, because I don't see how, with all the information I've collated, it can't be seen as a genuine legal case and an infringement of our human rights. If I was Mexican, it's my human right to grow my own cannabis, but I'm not Mexican, so I haven't got that human right. Well, human rights know no boundaries, no territories and no borders, so a human right in Mexico is a human right in Britain, even if our corrupt politicians won't acknowledge it. So I'm exercising that human right, and I encourage all other people to do the same. Seek herbal independence, get away from the underground market, from what you don't know what you're dealing with. And if you get arrested, challenge the charges. I've phoned the police on myself and I've told them what I'm doing. And I've asked them, if ever they need to come and bust me because of a public report, they don't need to use violence. They can use a doorbell. That's all they need. Use a doorbell and I'll come and tell you everything you want to know. Show you everything you need to see. That's what I told my local police. And that was over a year ago. And touch wood, they haven't come. It's not to say they won't though. They might still come for me. In which case I'll try and set precedent for a defence case, because I won't ever plead guilty to breaking a law that is based on lies and is damaging to my health. Not guilty, Your Honour. Yeah, I acknowledge I've broken a broken law, but I'm not guilty of committing a crime. So, basically, on tomorrow's 420, so I've managed, with great effort from the Crowd Justice team and the new WTU solicitor, we've managed to get the page for the fundraiser written and approved, and it will launch tomorrow, April 420 at 4:20 p.m. And that is for people to donate to from the canna community, so that we can all, as a community, put tiny bits each, because most of us are skint, put little bits in the pot, so as a community we can afford to take this litigation against this government for our human rights. I can't do it alone, I'm broke, many people are. As a community we can do this. WTU has over 3,400 members. If you all put £4.20 in, that's nearly £15,000. That will get the ball rolling. This fundraiser isn't private, it's public. Share it far and wide. Please donate whatever you can, and share on all platforms possible to everyone, not just people that you know like cannabis, to everyone. Give everyone a chance to support a fight for freedom and equality in the UK. So I don't know if that's explained to people what who I am, Phil Monk, what I'm all about, freedom and equality, and what WTU seeks, legal action against the government for our freedom and the end of the war on the cannabis community. So I've done virtually everything I can in terms of getting us this far. Now I need to put it over to you, the community, to do your bit and support me now and get us through the legal fees. I'm also asking for witness evidence statements for members who have been affected by prohibition. We need to know what prohibition has done to your life and what damage it has caused you. So this isn't, I've got a disease and I need cannabis. Yeah, I must emphasise this. This is, I'm a human and I choose cannabis, and I do not need to tell you, the government, why. I do not need to justify my personal choice to use cannabis. It's got nothing to do with anyone. Yeah, just like if someone chooses to drink alcohol or chooses not to, that has got nothing to do with anyone. Alcohol causes psychosis. Do we put all alcohol drinkers in prison to protect them from the potential risk of alcohol psychosis? No, we don't. We tell them how to drink wisely, safely and responsibly. And that's what we need as well. So, thank you, Alistair. Thank you, Jason. I thank you, everyone who actually listens to all of this video. I thought I'd talk it rather than write it, because you can see me. You know I'm a real person, yeah? And you also get to hear a bit about what WTU has been doing in the last 12 months. If you're new to the group, I highly recommend that you go to the videos tab and scroll all the way through. There's a lot of films, a lot of information, and you can actually see the progress of WTU over the last year. So I hope and pray you'll continue to support us, and that we will raise hundreds of thousands of pounds so that we can take these government people to court, because they've got no right. They've got no right to take away our freedom and our rights. So I feel like I've waffled for ages. If you have any questions, please write them below. I'm also going to share the link underneath for the fundraiser page, and we'll also have a new website up and running very soon, so I'll be launching that as well. So lots of love, everyone. Take care and keep well, and speak soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.